This final screencast discusses reflexes. Reflexes may be found in Chapter 7 of your textbook. This screencast was designed to help you achieve the following objectives. Define a reflex, listing all its characteristics. Contrast somatic and autonomic reflexes. Contrast cranial and spinal reflexes. And lastly, describe in detail the movement of nerve impulses through a reflex arc. A reflex is an immediate, involuntary, predictable response to a stimulus. By predictable, what I mean is if you apply the same stimulus to the same part of the body, you get the same response. Reflexes can be inborn or learned. An inborn reflex example would be the withdrawal reflex, where you will withdraw your hand from a very hot pot or from a sharp object that you may touch. A learned reflex would be quickly pressing on the brake of your car in response to a red light. You don't think about it, you just do it in response to seeing a red light. That's a learned reflex. A reflex arc is the pathway that's traveled by nerve impulses involved in producing a reflex. A reflex arc always has 5 components. The receptor detects the stimulus. In response to the detection of the stimulus, sensory impulses travel along a sensory neuron toward an integration center. In this example, the integration center is in the spinal cord, but an integration center could be in the brain, or it could even be in a ganglion of the autonomic nervous system. A motor neuron is activated, the 4th component of a reflex arc, and it sends motor impulses out to an effector, in this case, a skeletal muscle. Again, all reflexes involve these 5 components, which we call a reflex arc. There are somatic reflexes and autonomic reflexes. Somatic reflexes are reflexes where the effectors are skeletal muscles, such as the gag reflex and the patellar knee-jerk reflexes. With practice, you can learn to suppress or control somatic reflexes because the effectors are under voluntary control. Sword swallowers have learned how to suppress the gag reflex. Individuals who put contact lenses into their eyes have learned to stop blinking their eyes when the contact lens touches the surface of the eye, so they've learned to suppress the corneal reflex. Autonomic reflexes, on the other hand, cannot be voluntarily controlled because the effectors are smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and glands that are not under voluntary control. You cannot modify to any significant amount the cardiac muscles of your heart. You cannot stop the production of saliva in response to the dentist shoving various tools into your mouth. It's a reflex that is not under your control. Some reflexes are integrated in the spinal cord and do not require conscious thought, while other reflexes are integrated in the brain and they do require conscious thought. An example of a cranial reflex would be one where you see a red light and you reflexively depress on the brake. Let's look at the reflex arc for the patellar knee-jerk reflex. So when a physician takes a percussion hammer and taps on the patellar ligament, it pulls on the quadriceps tendon, which pulls on the quadriceps muscle. This tension is detected by the sensory receptor in the quadriceps muscle, shown here in green, and in response, sensory impulses are sent via the sensory neuron toward the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, integration occurs where the sensory neuron synapses with the motor neuron. The motor neuron then sends motor impulses to the quadriceps muscle, causing the quadriceps muscle to contract, and the knee is extended. What is happening here is by tapping the patellar ligament, you are fooling the nervous system into thinking that the leg, or the knee rather, is being bent. And to maintain posture so that one does not fall over, the spinal cord issues a correction, causing the quadriceps muscle to contract and extend the knee. Now let's review the objectives of the screencast. Define a reflex listing all its characteristics. Contrast somatic and autonomic reflexes. Contrast cranial and spinal reflexes. Describe in detail the movement of nerve impulses through a reflex arc. The topic of the next screencast will be the introduction to the brain and the cerebrum.